Greetings everyone, this is the Questing GM. So I'm back to continue my prep quest series for Out of the Abyss Chapter 2. So just to recap a little bit on the previous video, I was basically just running down through the whole mechanics and whole list of things to consider and how to organize the traveling parts of Out of the Abyss. Basically the in-between parts between the later chapters in the first half, and also subsequently you can use most of the same ideas when you do the second half when you travel through the Underdark again, possibly with a larger party, but yeah, okay, we'll keep that for the second half. So this video is going to be about my method that I used for creating random encounters in between each location that my party visited. Slupudub to Gracklestock, and then I think after that it was Neverlight Grove, and then to Blindonstone, and then they made it up to the surface. So in between those, there was a lot of traveling that we did, but I didn't use this current method that I used for the first half. I used it for the second half, but it didn't turn out so well when I used it on my group. So I'm only just throwing out these ideas right now to you guys, just for you guys, if you are looking for ways that other DMs are doing the traveling and how do they create random encounters almost on the fly. Although I wouldn't say that my method is best. My method is probably best used during prep. It's for you to roll the random encounters, generate the random encounters way before you start the session. So at least you have something like a list of random encounters ready to spring on your players when they make the checks for random encounters. So if you remember in Out of the Abyss in the book, my books are currently still packed, so I can't really take them out and flip for you. But if you read chapter 2, when it comes to random encounters, basically the book suggests that you make 2 checks per day, and I believe it's one while they're traveling and one while they're resting. And I believe it's something like if they roll a 5 or something like that, or was it, I think, a roll of 1 or something like that. The chances was actually quite on the low side, but if you roll one of those, then there's a random encounter, and then you have to roll to see what kind of encounter did they get. Was it like a terrain encounter, or was it a creature encounter, or was it a combination of both? And once you determine what sort of encounter they get, then there's like a whole list of different encounters that's in the book. So like in the book itself, they have a list of terrain encounters, and in the list they have a list of creature encounters, and if you get both, then you're supposed to like roll both, and then you're supposed to combine them together. But that was actually my problem with the random encounter generation method in the book. Sometimes the terrain that appears and the creature that comes with it together doesn't there's a lot of empty space that you have to like put into making them fit together sometimes. Like if you get, say for example, like a gorge, like if you got something like, let me just look for an example here, a muck pit terrain encounter followed by a creature encounter, which let's just say maybe it's something like escape slaves. That they don't really make sense. Like there's not a lot of consequence to the random encounter. Like the players will just say like just throw your hands up. So we're just going to avoid the muck pits, and you're just going to interact with the slaves, or maybe the slaves are captured in the muck pits, and then you're just going to spend your day pulling out the slaves, and nothing else happens. Although theoretically speaking, if they've dealt with a creature encounter, then they actually get +1 to the draw pursuit if you're using that mechanic, which I didn't. But I think it would be quite a dangerous thing to just fully rely on the random encounters that was provided in the book, because you're gonna run into problems where some of the encounter combinations or some of just the plain terrain encounters just don't make sense, and you're gonna run out of variety, and it becomes a little bit predictable and a little bit boring, as if depending on how many random encounters you run with your players between the travels. So what I decided was that I needed something that was a bit more random, a bit more unpredictable, and but at the same time, somewhat can hold itself together when what regardless of what the result comes out from it. So rather than just just sticking to determining whether was there a random encounter, I also saw I created like several tables slash lists of of how the encounters appear, or or in a fuller picture sense, like how to create a random encounter literally from scratch, from zero to a full encounter that it's really up to that gives the DM some flexibility to whatever they want to do with it. And I definitely use the creature and terrain encounter as a base, but I also sort of like mixed in with some other supplements that I found uh, online, and just sort of like meshing them together, and making it a bit more coherent in a way. But before I get to my method, if because my method uh, admittedly takes some work to do, and like I said, it's not really like instantaneous. Like you can't do it on the fly during the session itself. So if that's not what you're looking for, then I would just highly recommend that you go up, check out the DMG, the Dungeon Masters Guild. Sorry, there are a couple of supplements out there. I can't remember the names. I think it was called Journey to the Underdark or something like that. Some guys, basically he's already made like a lot more random encounters that can be used in the Underdark, and it's predominantly also for Out of the Abyss. So I think if I'm not mistaken, there was like about 20 more encounters or something like that. And it was very highly reviewed, and if you hang around in the Out of the Abyss DM's Facebook group, you will definitely hear a lot of recommendations for those supplements. So if you want something a bit more quicker, something more dirtier, and uh, less less relying on tables and procedural generation, then yeah, I would definitely recommend you go check those out, because that gets the job done, and you just pay only like like a couple bucks or $5 or something like that for it. So that's going to save you a lot of time and a lot of work. Uh, but for my case, so generally I've split up random encounter generations to a few things. Uh, First, I want to determine the terrain where the random encounter is happening. Second would be to find out if there's any kind of terrain features or hazards. So the difference between features and hazards, I'll get into it a little bit. It's somewhat defined in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but I definitely I have my own sort of like somewhat definition for that. And after you've determined the terrain feature and hazards, then you have to determine the lighting of the terrain. Or at that point in time when the characters reach the encounter. After that is the phase res, and then the next thing would be events, and the last part would be the creatures. So that's altogether like there's basically just 6 components or 6 tables that I sort of like use to mix and match with each other to generate a final random encounter for the players to decide. And you can for like parts for like the events and the creatures, you can sort of like take it away in the sense that maybe if you when you roll for the random encounter check for the day, and then get something that is just purely terrain, then you can just like forego the last 2 parts. Like nothing happens, there's no random event that happens to it, and there's no random creature that was involved in it. So it's a purely terrain encounter challenge. And I should also mention that my random encounter generation method also used the encounter list that was provided in chapter 10, when in the second half of the book, when the party is traveling with a so-called army. But that chapter also expands a lot on what can happen during the Underdark. The most famous of which was the random events, which I felt that there was no reason why you can't use the random events in chapter 10 to be used in chapter 2, because you're also traveling with the prisoners, and there's definitely warrants some things to happen there while they're traveling. So I'll start with the first thing, which is to talk about the terrain. Now, what kind of terrains are there in the Underdark? I mean, that's one thing that I felt that the book the adventure module should have like given a bit more ideas, rather than just saying what kind of terrain encounters they are, because diff I felt that if different terrain encounters that happens in different kind of terrains can have a very different kind of context and different kind of feel. So that's already providing some sort of variety just to the same terrain encounters. But when it happens in different places in different kind of terrains, that's already, that's already expands the possibilities already. So where I got this types of terrains list from was actually from the 3 point, I think it was a 3.5 supplement, from for Forgotten Realms, called the Underdark. It's simply titled the Underdark. And they generally there's like a list, there's like a whole chapter, I believe. Basically, it just lists down all the types of terrains that you can expect to find in Underdark. So you have it. So according to my list, I might have narrowed down a few. I might have taken out a few that was not useful in the context of the Out the Abyss, but it was basically just like 10 types of terrains. So you have a gorge. So gorge is naturally something that you have to climb up or down on. Let me just see. Yeah. So okay, let's see. Uh, An underdark gorge is nothing more than a cave that runs vertically instead of horizontally. So that speaks for itself. Gorges often feature streams and therefore life and food, although the difficulty of the terrain make a gorge less desirable as a residence than a living cave with less extreme topography. Since gorges can run for many miles, they often serve as the highways of the underdark. So that's already one way you can see like it just sort of like just gives you an extra dimension to think about. Like it's sort of like a tunnel slash cave, but it's instead of the straight one, it just goes up. It goes vertically up. So there's a lot of possibilities you can play with that sort of terrain. Like if there were creatures on top of it, creatures below it, and the challenges of having to climb around it and that sort of thing. And certain terrain features fits really well in a gorge rather than on a flat surface. Yeah. So travel along the floor of a gorge can be very difficult, but many Underdark races take steps to improve these natural roads for the use of their own merchants and hunters. Gorges also offer good opportunities to change depth and perhaps access another level quickly through a little climbing. So you see, just that description alone, it opens up so many kinds of possibilities already, that how terrain itself can change the dynamic of the random encounters that you roll. Like they might be bound to find like ladders or lifts of that kind. There is a danger of falling objects onto them from above if they have to, or or if they are navigating and then they decide they are going towards a certain direction, but that direction also includes them having to move between levels of the Underdark. Yeah, so that's just like a taste of how terrain can affect changes the encounter entirely. So there's gorges, there's an abyss. An abyss is basically like a giant version of a gorge. An abyss is simply a great open space, sometimes many dozens of miles in breadth and virtually bottomless. Some Underdark abysses are scores of miles deep. Yeah, so it's just like a giant version of a gorge, and you can do so much with just different thing of sizes. Then you have caves, the traditional cave, a cave in the Underdark. Like it can be used as a camping spot. It can be used as a fortification of some kind, or it can be just, it can be just simply as a dead end to where they were traveling and this sort of thing. You have lakes. So lakes is just a natural body pool of water. Doesn't necessarily have to be the dark lake. It can be just a very small lake. And then there may be things underneath the lake. There may be things above the lake, if you want to say. And there's definitely challenges to having to travel across the lake if they are forced to. Then you have rifts. So rifts, if I remember correctly, it was sort of rifts. So unlike gorges, rifts are not formed by erosion. They are scars of tremendous upheavals deep in the earth. So it's kind of like gorges, but instead of like erosion and natural paths usually caused by water, these are probably caused more by earthquakes. And rifts may be dozens or even hundreds of miles in length and sometimes miles deep, but they are rarely wide, more or less than a bow shot across. So that's also a really different set of challenges, like how do you get across rifts. that if you have to climb down a rift or climb up a rift, it may be actually tighter and more difficult than a gorge, and that's already different kinds of possibilities available already. Uh, then compared to rifts, then after rifts you have shafts. So shafts, according to the Underdark supplement definition of it, uh, they they're kind of like gorges and rifts. Is that this is like vertical spaces for people to travel between, but shafts also can be pockets, constant pressurized pockets of air. So therefore, there is the extra challenge where when you're climbing between in a shaft, you may get blown off by high air pressure. So that's already a different challenge already for traveling. Then you have the traditional tunnels. So it's just a tunnel, like even a conspicuous tunnel can have many traps put into them. So you can play around with that. You can play around with what a tunnel can do. And the thing is, here's the thing. When I was running out of the abyss, it got boring pretty quickly when I was using the terrain encounters, because it was like okay, a rock falls. Where does the rock fall? It falls in a tunnel. It falls in a cave. Then that's basically like your go-to all the time when you're playing. I mean, like when you're relying on the terrain encounters in the book without context. But a rock fall in a gorge, a rock fall in a shaft, a rock fall in a shift, in a rift, a rock fall in a tunnel, a rock fall in a cave. All these have different meanings, can have different considerations and different challenges, presents different challenges to players. So you see, that's how the variety of just terrain with terrain features or terrain hazards can just increase the possibility tremendously. Then you have vaults. So vaults are basically like giant caves, and from the description is that vaults are usually so huge that they can actually, like Menzoberranzan is actually built inside a vault, by the Underdark definition of a vault. Like these are gigantic caves that can house like cities, or can house like Wizard's Tower, or in like how I like to call it, it was the final battleground for the Demon Lords in the final chapter was basically a vault. It's basically held inside a vault. And the other thing about the Underdark in the Forgotten Realms is that the Underdark is sometimes also tied very closely to the volcanic areas. So even some of the vaults or some of the caves can be very tied to volcanic areas, and therefore the whole lava swell terrain can happen in a volcano. I mean, with the players realizing or not. Yeah. So that's basically the 10 terrain types. So you can play around. Yeah, you can use a D10 to just roll and see which terrain type the random encounter is taking place in. And then the next one you want to roll is for the terrain feature and hazards. Now features are basically just, I would say, mostly just harmless things that happens to be in the terrain where the players are traveling through. We're talking using things like warning signs. We're talking things like the fungus cavern. We're talking things like the crystal clusters. Basically, sometimes they're just they are sometimes just general features that just get in the way of the players, or it could be what was I looking? Something beneficial, like the fungus cavern. The fungus cavern is basically free food, and the players, the party may stumble upon, and they may spend some time to forage it, and get something out of it. So hazards is the one where it's basically something that can be harmful to the players for traveling through, and I like hazards in a sense that not only is it like it becomes a decision point when the player just stumbles into a terrain with a hazard, because you kind of want to have consequences for all random encounters in Out of the Abyss, that making decisions about going through random encounter, it should be a big decision in its own right. Like for example, let's say if they run into a terrain with certain hazards, like for example, like sinkholes, or some steam vents, or some webs. So if you may spring some of them as surprises, like maybe like the lava swell, like if you're walking through volcanic area and then you roll the hazard and they get lava swells, they just burst on them from the ground from below, then they just make reflex saving throws and take damage, and then you're pretty done. But at the same time, you may also want to offer opportunities for the players to tell the players in advance, like this is where you are right now, this is what you're seeing. You're entering a volcanic area, and you know that may give them a hint of what they can expect if they decide to travel through it. But then you can also give them the option that if you decide to go through this, then you get to complete your travel pace for the day, speed, and cover that many miles. But if you decide to to take a detour or bypass it some way, you can either say that okay, either you really reduce your pace by one below, but if you're slow, maybe you make only half the amount of progress or something like that, or or if you decide to take another route, then you bypass it uh, without taking the risk, but maybe you lose like half day's progress or something like that, just because of you want to take a safer route for that sort of thing. So I like I like when you use terrain encounters more as decision points rather than just to drain player resources just for the sake of it. And I probably should mention one thing that how Dungeons and Dragons look at random encounters. Like, what's the purpose of random encounters in Out of the Abyss or in Dungeons and Dragons in general? I would highly suggest you read up page 85 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. They do make some really some good starting points about thinking about random encounters, like what are they for, and I would like they come down to is create number one is to create urgency, which makes a lot of sense, because in the sense of in the context of Out of the Abyss is to the every time they bump into a random encounter, there is a possibility of the drows catching up to them. So that's a sense of urgency already there. So the random encounters is a really good obstacle for them to really try to get across or try to think about, and have to try to outsmart these random encounters so that at the same time, while they're making progress, they're also not being chased by the drow at the back. The second thing is to establish atmosphere. So like I said, the random encounters is the perfect place to bring out the flavor of the Underdark. So this is, I mean, this is where there's not only monsters they have to be careful of. There's also terrain, weird kind of terrain that they have to navigate around or navigate through, just to make progress for the day. Drain character resources. That's almost it's almost probably the predominant way that DMs would probably use random encounters for, is just to drain encounters for the day. And we are not talking about resources in the sense like hit points or spells. I think those are some resources. But in the context of Underdark, there's a lot more resources. That's more valuable to players. For example, like food and water, equipments, and I definitely try to implement some random encounters where it could risk the loss of equipment and supplies as a result of certain encounters. So that's something that that's how you can use random encounters to make the traveling through the Underdark more dangerous. And what's not more dangerous than traveling through the Underdark? But at the flip side, there's also to provide assistance. Like there are, like I said, like there are terrain features where players will bump into that's actually beneficial for them, and it may help them to replenish supplies. In some cases, some of the terrain features that I actually used was like you could find things like warning signs. Like in the book, there was the warning signs of there were like devils, there were like demons ahead. There was a drow insignia of some kind, and there was like demons ahead, and you could as a DM say the next creature encounter they would meet would have a certain percentage of being demons, but at the same time it gives a foreshadow to the party to say if they decide to continue on this route, there's a likely chance for them to meet demons, and therefore they have to make a decision whether they want to continue on this route or they want to find another way to go in the same direction. And also, the features also is one other thing you can put in is it's an adventure site, a pure dungeon. Like basically, it's how the set encounters in Out the Abyss places the Oozing Temple and the Lost Tomb of Cain. You just stumble into a terrain. It's probably like maybe you stumble into a vault, and there it is. There's a dungeon for them to explore, and it gives you as a DM and the party like a mini side quest, a mini session to just go through that one session as through a small minor dungeon or something like that. And you're supposed to get something out of the dungeon. It could be treasure, it could be supplies, it could be just a good place to rest, or it could be just any kind of rewards that you want to like give players for. And that's the beauty of random encounters. It's like all random encounters shouldn't always be bad things. There are definitely some good things to be had at the end of it. Uh, add interest. Add interest is just where we can use random encounters to like just showcase the world. You can insert the lore, pieces of lore. You can teach them a little bit more about the world and that sort of thing. And the last part is definitely to use it to reinforce campaign themes. So in Out the Abyss, this is pretty easy. This is the whole idea of you can introduce the whole idea of madness. You can introduce the whole idea of the phase race. You can introduce the whole idea of underdark races and how they treat each other and that sort of thing. So this is how the D&D Dungeon Masters guys recommends you to use random encounters. And yeah, these are definitely all each of these are definitely ways that you should think about when you're using this method to create random encounters. Like, what do you want to use the random encounters for? And it can be for any of these reasons. So coming back to talking about the terrain features and terrain hazards. So in terrain features, I basically have about 12 terrain features. And I also have the same amount of 12 in hazards. So like I said, features are usually more harmless and and tend towards being beneficial or rewarding to the players. For hazards are risky, but there's also sort of like an upside to make it worth taking the risk. So random terrain features you can have like the ones that was in the book. It was cliff and ladders, high ledges, slime and mold, crystal clusters. So crystal cluster is the one where you get that sort of like flashbang quartz thing. Fungus cavern is basically depending on what you roll for the fungus table. You can either get food, you can either get water, you can even get both. And there are certain fungus that like the exotic ones, they don't have food and water implications, but there are different applications for them. Like zirkwood is something you can use for crafting, for example. Rope bridges. So this is definitely the ones that you would want to put for things like where there are rifts or they're like gorges. Like there's empty space across, and that can be a potential hazard at the same time. But imagine if you roll for gorge and you got a rope bridge terrain feature, and then you also have to roll for monsters. So that creates a more dynamic and a different kind of battleground rather than just your standard cave tunnel, 15 feet across, just walk the other end and just whack the fellow, that sort of thing. Underground streams, that's also something that the players may decide to use that as a water source, but it's really up to you, like if you want to really allow for that kind of thing. Warning signs was the one I say for demons. You can actually even play for warning signs to say like indicate like that, like different kind of monsters ahead, aberrations, humanoids, oozers or plants or that sort of thing. So clean water was another feature that I created by myself. Basically, is I wanted to make the traveling a little bit more deadlier if the party was willing to track it, in the sense that sometimes there may be the water they collected, for example, like an underground stream, may be a bit polluted or may be contaminated to the extent that it was not safe for drinking, and players had to spend resources to make that water drinkable. For example, it could be like a spell, like a purify water or drink spell. It could be having actual containers to actually cook to actually boil the water of some kind, or they had to spend extra resources to make sure that the water they drink was drinkable, and if it didn't, it could cause certain effects, like they got poisoned or they got diseases or something like that. So having a feature where they stumble, like for example, if they roll, for example, they got a lake terrain, and the terrain feature was that it was clean water. So whatever water they collected from there was 100% clear, was 100% clean, and there was no risk of drinking that water. Uh, you could say you could say that whatever terrain they got, they reached a dead end. So there was another feature added. It was a dead end. It was a waste of time. And that's just pure bad luck, or sometimes that's what kind of like what happens when you navigate around the Underdark without a map. You don't know where you don't know for sure every tunnel that you're traveling, every gorge, every shaft you're climbing up and down will definitely lead you to where you want to go next to. So it could be just like a simple dead end, and therefore that day's traveling pace was wasted, or drop has just gone up because of that. Abandoned campsite. So this is also another one that I created for myself, which is uh, it was a secure place for someone to camp, and this is also kind of where you can just throw like random treasures, random equipment, random supplies into there, just to not make your life so miserable. And here's one thing about random encounters: sometimes they're not totally random at all. Sometimes you can just uh, use whatever this list that I've come up with, and sort of like throw it appropriately at the players when you think they need it, or you think it will be a good challenge to have it go through that. My method doesn't really rely fully on purely dice rolls. Like maybe the dice rolls are good for you just to see what happens when different things mesh together, but at the same time you also make it flexible for yourself, that if you think abandoned camp, like if the players were running really really low on water, and they were running really really low on materials or equipment, and you feel that if they keep on going like this, it would be unfair to them to just keep on losing water and food for no good reason, just throw an abandoned campsite for them, and they may think that like luck's on their side, but they may not know the truth otherwise. um, so what kind of hazards are there in the Underdark? So the ones from the book are basically just rock falls, sinkhole, steam vents, webs, gas leaks, horrid sounds, lava swell, mud pit. The ones that I added was basically you could just add like traps, like just simple traps. Uh, like somebody just put a trap there for whatever reason. It could be a natural trap, like certain monsters lay certain traps to attract prey, or it could be like an actual intentional trap placed by a humanoid race of some kind for whatever reason, to defend a home ground, or you know uh, to just deter visitors to go into certain direction, and sort of thing. Fungal spores. So this was something that I was quite surprised it was not so well introduced. I think it was probably introduced in the second half of the book, but given the amount, like since Zookmoy is around and she's kind of like spreading her spores all over the place. So I thought that it was probably a good idea to also not only uh, expose players to the risk of madness, but it was also probably a very it was thematically fitting to expose players to these spores of Zookmoy, and they may actually inhale the spores, and then they sort of like start to take over their minds, and they want to serve Zookmoy and cause madness and that sort of thing. Uh, and the reverse side of clear water terrain feature was to have a slime pool. Like certain slimes may just residing inside the pool, and the players may mistaken every body of water as clean water. But once they start deciding to take water from it, they may actually have stumbled into a pool of slime instead. That's a creature random encounter right there. So that's basically how I create the terrain and the terrain features and hazards that comes with it. So like I said, even just with this combination of these three lists of terrain type random encounters, they are already standalones, but they are basically the terrain feature, terrain encounters from the book in a much bigger package, and there's a lot more variety just as a result of that. So just play around, just play around with these combinations, and you never know what you'll be inspired by, to see what you can find, what you can think about. All right. So moving on after that, after you determine the terrain and the features and hazards with it, is the lighting. So for some reason, this seems to be taken for granted in Out the Abyss. Like maybe DMs don't want to track the lighting of the place all too much, But I think the book itself also gives you some indication, like, there are basically two possible sources of light. It could be uh, dim light, or it could be just pure darkness. So dim light can be caused by fluorescent fungus. uh, if you may allow your players to salvage those if you want, to forage those if you want. Uh, the other reason why it could be dim light is because of the phase rest. Now I kind of split between lighting and the phase rest. Like if the place was naturally, if I roll a place that was darkness, but then when I roll for phase rest, the place actually has phase rest, then I will actually try to note that as phase caused by phase rest, and I try to give a player the heads up that this place radiates some kind of magical light rather than natural sources, and that might give a hint to the players that they may be walking into an area with phase rest, and you kind of like want to slowly introduce the effects of phase rest slowly through exposure, rather than just giving it all in to the players, that unless they're probably underdark races lah. But you kind of like want to let the players slowly lean into the effects of phase rest and let them discover for themselves what it does and what it can do to them. And for most part, it's usually negative. It's usually bad for them. But like I said, there are also some good sides of why you want to stay in the phase rest for defensive purposes, especially in the camp. All right. So for lighting, basically, what I would do was I would just roll like a d6. I would just roll a d6. If it's 1 to 3, I would say there's no lighting. There's basically darkness. If it's 4 to 6, I would see there's dim light. But what's the dim light caused? Is it caused by fungi, or is it caused by phase rest? That's where I roll for the phase rest. And based on the probability, I think the book does give you the probability for this. Basically, it's about 50% chance. If you roll a d6, 1 to 3, there's no phase rest. 4 to 6, there's the terrain is suffused with the phase rest. All right. Then after that, the next thing that I roll for is the events. What kind of events that can happen in a random encounter? Now, what's the reason why do I go for events? Because number one is that you don't want every random encounter if it's just terrain. There's only terrain encounters to think about. If it's creatures, there's always combat. You kind of like want to mix it up and make sure like it's not always about either one of those. Like there may be certain things that's happening within a terrain involving certain creatures in a specific terrain, and therefore the focus is not always on fight or flight. Although that's probably one of the main concerns for people who travel in the Underdark. Like if they stumble into something, should they fight it or should they run away from it? But random events in another way I was using it is basically that it's sort of like what happens within the traveling party, and because given how first half and second half you're traveling with basically NPCs, it's basically things that can happen with the NPCs while they're traveling, and it usually doesn't have to be connected to a terrain, but it adds another sort of dynamic. Like the players have to sort of like sort out problems with the NPCs, like what certain things that happens to NPCs, and they have to sort it out in a different way, rather than just concentrating a lot on what's happening in front of them. So random events, the ones that I use from, I think I took most of this from the books, except I just added a couple. So battle aftermath is basically if you walk into a terrain and there were creatures involved, and you roll a terrain and it says battle aftermath. Basically, whatever creatures they were dead, they're all dead. So what you're basically just walking into, you're basically either walking into free loot, free treasures, free equipment, free supplies, and even in some cases, like if it's like the creatures involved, they are actually like monsters, like beasts or something like that, then it may actually even involve free food. So that's a different way of how you can how battle aftermaths, how events can change the entire dynamic of random encounters that involves creatures and terrains. They could be diseases, like one of the NPCs has contracted some kind of disease from whatever source. So that's resource that has to be taken out from the players to deal with it. Or in some cases, if the players can't even deal with it, like they have no means, they have no spells for it, then that's sort of like just watching that NPC just wither away, and that's also one of the uh, dangers of traveling in the Underdark. Sometimes you're like there's no one can help you in the Underdark, and you just sort of like just watch NPCs die off uh, from diseases. Another one that I used was madness. Sometimes just gain certain level of madness and they just go mad and maybe just leave the party just like that. Or they get poisoned, like poison in the sense it could be like food poisoning or water poisoning, or actually get something bitten by a certain poisonous creature and they have poisons. So these are random events that can happen. You can make it happen to the players as well. Although players will probably have make some arguments like they want to take more precautions against this sort of thing to happen against them. But it's easier to target the NPCs for that reason alone. And random events that you can think about, especially when it involves the PCs that are resting, like random events when they are resting or camping. It can be like sports supplies, like rats came in and ate some of their food. Slime came in, contaminated some of their water, or even just a simple idea like they not only lost supplies for food and water, they could lose weapons and armor. Like maybe while they were climbing gorges and climbing rifts, or they're walking across ledges, narrow ledges, they just by chance they lost. There's a chance they lost a piece of weapon, just falls off the gorge, and it's up to them. They don't want to pick it up, but it could be like just time wasting for them to do so. Or just lost equipment. Like it doesn't have to be weapon and armor all the time. It could be just like a backpack. It could be just a lantern. It could be something like that. So for those reasons alone, I would say like I would kind of suggest like you want to think about when the players make their inventory list, you kind of like want to number it in a way, or you just want to have a copy of their equipment list handy with you, so that when you roll random events that involves losing of these kinds of equipment or things like that, you kind of like want to know what's a good thing to take away from them at a certain point in time. And I'm not doing this. I'm not doing these random events always for so-called sadistic purposes. Like lots of like some players would probably get upset. Like if there's no good reason why they should lose equipment or they should lose supplies, then they will kind of probably want to argue with the DM, like saying, why should I lose it? Like it's kind of unfair, or I'm just purely being punished by luck. Which is probably that's if they are kind of understand that that's kind of like what underdog traveling in underdog is like. Sometimes it's just bad luck. But if you feel like that's a bit heavy-handed on your side, I actually do give them some sort of incentive. Like for example, like if they are willing to lose a piece of equipment, and maybe you can give them a few chances, like maybe they may get a save to recover it before it's gone forever, saving throw. Or maybe you say if you are willing to lose that particular piece of equipment, then I'm going to give you an inspiration point for it, and vice versa. Like if you're unwilling to lose this piece of equipment, then you can spend an inspiration point to get it back. Or you know don't make it like it's always a lose-lose situation for them. Always make random encounters something for players to really think about, and make them weigh the pro and cons for going through the random encounter. And one random event that I also use, which is like I have eight of them, so it's just a matter of rolling a d8 and just deciding which one you want to use. It's just a pure decision point, just like a fork in the road. Basically, where do we go now? Do we go up? Do we go left? Do we go right? Do we go down? That sort of thing. And you can sort of like build upon whatever decision they make. You may not actually even plan ahead of what difference does the decision make. But you just want to utilize that sense of indecision to put into your player in a mindset of like they have to make a lot of decisions at every point and every turn, and whatever decision they make, you want to make sure it matters. So that's sort of like giving them the player agency. You may want to call it the illusion of choice, but I kind of like I prefer sort of like rewarding their being decisive rather than paralysis by analysis sort of thing. All right. So after the random event, which is the last part, So we are reaching almost the end of this video, which is the monsters, the creature encounters. So creature encounters can be very straight up and simple. The ones in the book, they even give you like specific like monsters to list of monsters to fight, but I much prefer something more flexible, and there's a lot more variance to it, in the sense that I much rather the creature encounters that I throw at my players, at the group, would be based on their current party level. You want creature encounters to be challenging, in a sense, because you want to hit quality over quantity. Fighting, if you were fighting like five skeletons, and they are like at level 3 or level 4, and if you're fighting the same 5 skeletons by the time they're level 6 or 7, it's going to be, it's admittedly going to be very boring, and you can't throw the same encounter at them like for the last 3 sessions. So despite what the creature encounter in the book is they give you, I feel like that was actually very, very limiting. So what I've decided to do is that I sort of like made it like a 2-layer thing when it comes to creature encounter. Number one is I will roll for a d20, and I sort of like divided the d20 into, based on the types of monsters they are in the monster manual, and subsequently in Modern Canaan and Volo's Guide. So you have humanoids, you have plants, you have beasts, you have monstrosities, you have giants, you have demons, you have undead, you have aberrations, you have oozes, and then the last one that I put at the 20, which means it's a 5% chance. It's a demon lord. It's an actual demon lord. I actually made demon lords a random encounter using my method, because here's the thing. According to the book, they're only bound to only meet Demogorgon, Drublex, Zookmoi, and Fras Oblu, if they really get to meet him. Yinogu. Yeah, I think only about 5 of these demon lords are actually written inside the book that they actually get to meet them. But here's the thing, especially for like Yinogu, Baphomet, Zookmoi, Drublex, and Demogorgon, they're kind of like actually wandering around the Underdark. Like although the book never specifically mentions where they exactly, except for probably Zookmoi, Drublex. Actually, just Zookmoi and Yinogu. Like Zookmoi, you meet her in Neverlight Grove. Yinogu, you meet him in the second half of the book, where he basically just walks into the labyrinth and just starts leading a war band of Gnolls and just starts like killing whatever's inside. And Demogorgon is the one that you actually bump into a couple of times, but then the book never really says that where is he going and what is he doing and why is he at a certain place at a certain point of time. So I felt that bumping into this by making demon lords a random encounter. Number one, it's really bad luck if you get that 5%. After the other 5% of rolling a creature encounter, but this is also the chance for them to be exposed to each of the demon lords that's stated in the Out of the Abyss, and it's like, and using the demon lords in the random encounters is actually a very, very powerful foreshadowing tool. And it's something that I mean, like, you could just decide which demon lord that appears, although the ones that I stumbled on, I actually made another list. I only made Drublex and Demogorgon available as random encounters for demon lords. So I think at any point in the adventure, if the players bump into any of the demon lords, the natural response is to run. And just the idea of meeting a demon lord by itself is already a chance for them to get madness. So that's the purpose, of the demon lords are really there just to instill fear. Like, you are still in the Underdark and you're still going to meet, there's still the danger of the demons there, and that's what the whole adventure is all about. It's just the Underdark and the demon lords. So why did I divided the creature encounters based on types? Because I made a list of all the monster encounters that are set in the Underdark environment. If you notice in the DMG, I believe, they actually list down the monsters by environment. So I actually made a entire table, like entire Excel sheet, just of all the monsters that are listed as Underdark. And even by that, by going by by those criteria, I actually have there's actually a like a good so including the demonoids, there's actually a total of 728 monsters that is listed as Underdark creatures. So that number of possibilities mixed with the terrain it just makes the whole numbers almost infinite, almost infinity, and these are all the monsters from the types that I mentioned earlier. So there's so much variety in just putting different monsters in the same kind of even in the same kind of terrain, with the same kind of terrain feature and terrain hazards, and and not all these monsters are meant to be fought. Some of them can be interacted with, can be talked to, can be traded with, can be spoken to for exchange of information, and some are just just playing good challenges to throw at your party, and they're all of different levels of CR. Like the highest one, the highest CR monster would be CR 30, which is technically the Taras. Uh, like even like the demon lords themselves are going up to CR above the CR 20s, 21, 22s. You can bump into like an okay, I think I might have made a mistake here. They're all together. They're all together 251. Sorry, the 251 monsters that are listed as Underdark monsters. So the possibilities are just really endless, and it's I mean like if you have the monster manual, you have Volos Guide, and you have Modern Canaan's Tomb of Foes, why not take this opportunity to use all of them? I mean, you don't necessarily have to roll for them. If you get a creature encounter, but for example, like you get a random encounter that's for humanoids, then that opens the possibility of negotiation with the humanoids or whoever they meet. If you roll a random encounter that deals with giants, yeah, so there's a difference between the random encounters with giants, because they're sort of like still humanoid that you can still negotiate, but then they're also deadly in terms of brute strength that they can deal to the party. If they if they bump into undead, so Orcus is around, so why not bump into any kinds of undead? Plants, it could be the myconids, it could be just assassination finds. You want to talk about beasts? There's so many kinds of Underdark variant of beasts that's in Underdark, and monstrosities and aberrations. So these are the monstrosities and aberrations are like the mainstay category of monsters that are available in the Underdark. So that's so much possibilities to just use these monsters. So, all right. So I've actually put up this list of monsters of Underdark monsters in the Out of the Abyss DM's Facebook group. It probably is in one of the files. But if you want them, it's in an Excel sheet, so you can easily filter it by the types that I mentioned. And I mean, like once you filter it by the type that I mentioned, then you can once you roll and you get that type, you can just filter to that type, and you can look at the entire list of monsters within that type. I even included like where the monsters are found, like which books are they found in. So just feel free to just use that Excel sheet to plan ahead. So yeah, so this is basically how I generate random encounters in the Underdark. Like I said, this given the amount of there's like six tables to roll from, and some of them requires you to roll further tables within them. This is definitely something you don't want to use on the table. You want to do it pre-prep before the session, and you kind of like want to know a few things. That is that how many days are how far are they from their current place to their to their destination. So you can sort of like figure out how many encounters are there in between. Uh, you can actually even control the number of encounters if you want. You can also, if you know the state of their equipment and supplies and their level and their XP, you can also sort of like plan the random encounters ahead to sort of like suit to a certain progression track if you want to put them in certain ways. Or if you know, if there's something, if you are entirely like, at loss, like you don't want to get to the next place too soon, just make a random dungeon. And Dungeon Master's Guide has plenty of tools for you to make a random dungeon, and then you can just stumble upon in the Underdark as they travel around. Uh, as for the set encounters, the fixed encounters that are in the book, Silken Path, Hook Horror Hunt, uh, the Oozing Temple, and Lost Tomb of Cain. I really don't have any. I mean, like they are pretty solid by itself, I would say. The Silken Path. So the Silken Path, I didn't use it. I didn't get to use it because I felt that because they introduced the two goblins and I didn't want to make the goblins join them, and uh, it was an interesting way to do traveling, but it was also a bit scattered. Like you kind of like have to read through the whole Silken Path encounter to sort of make sense and trying to make it a bit more fun rather than just rolling dice and then getting a certain fixed result. And sometimes they have things like web breaking just for no reason, that sort of thing. And but the importance of the Silken Path encounter was that if they stumble into that cocooned halfling, he actually can lead them to the lost tomb of Cain as thanks for saving him and that sort of thing. So the next one will be the Hook Horror Hunt. That one is actually a good foreshadowing for the Gnolls or Yonogru, and depending if as a DM, like if you actually like that sort of thing, they can actually save some Hook Horror eggs, and they can actually rear the Hook Horror from an infant to a full adult, and that Hook Horror can actually become a companion to the party. So that's really up to you. Like if you can have the possibility of giving your party a potential Hook Horror companion, then yeah, by all means use that encounter. That's a pretty good one. The Oozing Temple was actually another one that I used as a foreshadowing tool to Driblex. I think there was a statue inside the Oozing Temple where they touch it and then they sort of like get visions of the Pudding King in Blinkenstone. But when I used that one, the biggest payoff for me when I used that was when they were introduced to the sentient gelatinous cube, and my party actually got very very attached to the gelatinous cube, and it actually became one of like the saddest deaths they had when the cube died because when the Pudding King was defeated. And then the last one was the Lost Tomb of Cain. So the Lost Tomb of Cain, it's a good mini dungeon. And it's a good distraction for players to go through. But the biggest takeaway for that one was to get Dawnbringer, was the legendary magic item. And I didn't use Dawnbringer. I took it off and I switched it into a Holy Avenger for the Paladin in our party. But the Dawnbringer there's a few things you need to know about the Dawnbringer. Number one is it's basically a very powerful source of light because it produces daylight. So if you check the rules for like sunlight sensitivity and that sort of thing, daylight actually is quite a dangerous thing to certain races, to certain monsters. The other thing is it's a sentient sword, which was something I didn't want to handle. And you kind of need to read the rules of sentient weapons and how to deal with them. And when players have a sentient weapon, they either tend to abuse it or they tend to talk to it too much that you as a DM, you're kind of like playing a DMPC by that point. So that's why I didn't use Dawnbringer, and it was actually more suiting for my paladin to get the Holy Avenger because he was on the redemption quest. So yeah, the fixed encounters by themselves are actually pretty solid, but like feel free to throw them in wherever you think it's appropriate. But at the same time, with my method, you can definitely create more opportunities that doesn't. My methods, the method that I used was basically ways that you can also create even more unique encounters like the ones that was given in the four were given in the book. So I don't know if I mean, like, I'm making this video just to share with you my ideas, and I haven't really put all this down into paper. It's kind of like all in my head, and also it's scattered around my notes. But if any of you are like really interested in it, just drop a comment, or bump me when I share this in the Audi Abyss DMs Facebook group. If you want the whole entire method lumped together, yeah, just let me know how many people are interested in it. Then I'll probably try to whip up a quick document, uh, most probably an Excel sheet or something like that, and I'll just upload it to the Audi Abyss DMs Facebook group for anyone to use it. But uh, I would definitely recommend people to like watch this video before you use that method, because then that document may not make sense without the context of how I use it or what I use it for. So I just passed the 1 hour mark. Was shorter than I expected, but then again, it's good that I finally can finish this chapter, because this is something that you will use many times. And the reason why I was aiming for a lot of procedural generation is to take away a lot of the predictability and the boringness that was provided in the book. I really wanted something that was so wild and random and infinite combinations, because it's going to be something that I'm going to use very often, and not just in the first half, but also in the second half. So I hope you all enjoy this video. Any questions, throw it my way in the comments or in the Facebook group. I'll try to answer them. And yeah, show me your interest if you want any more of this, more on this method of generation, or maybe even future videos. So I guess I'll be stopping right now. Good to be back. Definitely look forward to me tackling the next chapter, which is the chapter 3, the Dark Lake, and we'll see where it goes from there. So this is